Okay, so today we're going to be talking about solving by taking the square root of both sides of an equation. So your topic is written there. Pause and make sure that gets written in your notes. There's not any new vocabulary on this, so let's move on to the guided practice. Okay, look in your workbook, page 29, or copy onto your notes. And let's look at the equation 2x squared minus 5 equals 195. Now we know that we're going to solve for x, so we want to keep x on the left side and get rid of everything else little by little. So let's add 5 first, since that's the farthest away from the x, and that will leave us with 2x squared equals 200. Okay, again, the x squared needs to stay, so we'll divide by 2, and that will give us x squared equals 100. Then you remember, I hope, to get rid of the square, you square root both sides. And the square root will cancel each other out, and the only thing left on this side is the x, because the square and the square root cancel each other. Here, the square root of 100 is 10, but it can be 10 or it can be negative 10. So sometimes we write that x equals plus 10 or minus 10. So plus or minus 10, positive or negative 10. It's important that you remember whenever you take a square root that you have two possibilities, that both are positive or both are negative. Our next example is the same one, so all right, this is a better one. So let's look at now this one's going to take some time because there are so many pieces, but we know that if we add 10 to both sides, that will help, and it will give us 4 equals 4, right? Negative 6 plus 10. The next thing I want to do is get rid of the 4 on this side so that they can cancel, because 4 over 4 is a fraction, and that will leave us with x plus 3 squared equals 1. Now, when we have a square, to get rid of that, we square root both sides, and that will leave us with x plus 3 equals positive or negative 1. Now notice now I can't just subtract 3 from both sides because I have two different signs. So I take this equation and I break it into two possibilities. The first possibility is x plus 3 equals a positive 1. And the second possibility is that x plus 3 equals negative 1. And then you can go through and solve like regularly, where you're going to subtract 3. On this side, x is going to equal a negative 2. The other possibility is subtract 3, x equals negative 4. So those are your two possible answers. Okay, on this next one, if you'd like to pause and try it yourself before we go over it together, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll just start by subtracting 15. And on this side, I am left with x minus 1, the quantity squared, equals negative 16. Okay, negative 1 minus 15, negative 16. So I know next I have to get rid of the square, so I'm going to square root. That's going to be interesting, isn't it? So here the square and the square root cancel, so I just have x minus 1. On this side, I have a negative 16 underneath the radical. So first of all, I'm going to have a plus or minus a negative 16, but I have to take care of the negative 16. And if you remember from earlier, negative 16 is I times positive 16. And positive 16 is 4. So this would be a 4i or a negative 4i. Okay, and here you have your plus or minus, which would change the sign but really leave it kind of the same. And then x minus 1 is going to equal positive or negative 4i. Now, because I have two things going on, I have to have two different possibilities for equations. So I'm going to go two different directions. On this one, I'm going to have x minus 1 equals a positive 4i. The other side, I will have x minus 1 equals a negative 4i. And then we'll solve by adding 1, and you would get x equals 4i plus 1. Remember, you cannot combine i's and 1's because it's a constant and then the other one's an imaginary. So if I add 1 to these two, I would get x equals negative 4i plus 1. Now if you wanted to put them together, you could say x is plus or minus 4i plus 1. So either one would be great. Okay? If you still have questions, of course, there's a great YouTube video here that you can watch, and hopefully it'll help you a little bit more. If you get it, then go ahead, just work on your assignment.